I will commit to everything and anything
Looking at the nation of Iran from a distance, there would not seem to be much that anyone would covet, certainly not from a government that remains in secular tatters and at times would appear to be just this side of a certifiable madness. But it's that madness attracting people like the terrorist group known as ISIS. For they and everyone else knows Iran has nuclear material, is trying to develop their own bombs, and thus covet getting their hands on a weapon of mass destruction to use against the West anytime, anywhere. Welcome to MidPoint. Former member of the U.S. House of Representatives and former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, and former senior advisor to the U.S. State Department and principal for D.C. International Advisory, Christian Whiton. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Ed.
Pete, I'm going to begin with you. When you hear statements, as we heard coming into this segment, from a member of the Iranian government saying we are not interested in nuclear weapons, how much laughter do you find yourself suddenly being filled with?
Well, I mean, clearly that is nothing but total misdirection. Iran for years has been focused on getting a nuclear weapon. There are estimates out that if they really put a concerted effort into finalizing their program, they may have a weapon within the next 3 to 6 months, or they could get a weapon within 3 to 6 months. They are committed to getting nuclear weapons, and the West ought to do everything that we can to slow down and hopefully stop that from happening.
Pete, there are those critics who say that the United States taking a hard line on Iran is the wrong way to go about trying to get their cooperation and trying to make sure that they don't develop the bomb. Do you fall in line with that?
I mean, this is absolutely a ludicrous discussion that we're having about Iran. This administration has to decide who our friends are and who our allies are and who our enemies are. Two countries whose leadership supported us in our efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan, our fight against terrorism. We threw them under in Gaddafi. They were not perfect individuals, but they were allied in keeping the Middle East and Northern Africa secure and stable, and we threw them under the bus. And now we're talking about being friends with Iran. What is the strategy of this administration? Where are they going to go? What is their foreign policy? What's in tatters right now is the foreign policy of this administration.
Christian, is it fair to say that anybody who believes we shouldn't take a hard line against Iran, anybody in the administration or out, those who say that, and I'm going to be very simple here, they are simply clueless to the ways of foreign policy and simply do not want to understand what Iran really is?
I think they want to understand, they just fail. I mean, this is a tenet of the Washington foreign policy establishment, which is known to have its Republican-leaning and Democratic-leaning precincts, but is largely politically androgynous. And this is an age-old story of reformers in Iran. And this story began not in the Obama administration or in the Clinton administration, the last time people saw supposed reformers. It actually began right after the 1979 revolution, when our embassy workers were still hostages. There were people who perceived moderates in Iran, and it's just the oldest tale around. In fact, this is an evil regime. It's an Islamist regime. Even though it is Shiite and ISIS is Sunni, it has a whole lot in common with them in the desire to unify mosque and state. And there are no reformers, or if they are basically for show. This is a radical regime bent on destroying first Israel and then the United States.
About a minute left, then we'll take a break, come back with both of you. But Christian, to you first, this political androgyny, as you put it, is, in your opinion, is that going to get somebody killed?
It'll result in a nuclear Iran. This is something I saw firsthand with North Korea, where there are many of us who said we should be trying to make life difficult for this regime, empower people within. And they never said, no, they're willing to talk. Let's make a deal. So I think this is a one-way road to a nuclear-armed Iran, which is unfortunate because it'll make a very dangerous region much more dangerous.
Pete, same question. Those who understand what Iran is, the fear, that political androgyny that's going to cost us, and sooner or later, you hate to say this out loud, but there's going to be a pocket nuke somewhere. There's going to be something that will go off somewhere around the world, and it will cost lives because we overlooked what was happening right now.
I think if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, you're going to see an arms race in the Middle East, which is going to make it much more likely that at some point a nuclear weapon will fall into the hands of a terrorist group, a non-state actor, just like chemical weapons in Syria are probably in the hands of ISIS right now.
I'm going to mention that and a whole lot more because when we return, a notion that already holds enough weapons and a nation that holds enough weapons and is also run by someone of questionable mental capacity, and it's got everybody nervous. And no, this is not ISIS and this is not Iran or Iraq. Due, in fact, to a missing leader. Later on this hour, the questionable mental capacity of educators in Colorado forcing school kids to take action. That's coming up right here on MidPoint.